The very latest film in Phase 5 is finally in theaters. And if you clicked on this video, it's because you also need to talk about it. Because yes, with Thunderbolts, Marvel has finally given us a real movie. Possibly one of the best since Endgame. For me, it's in the same vein as Shang-Chi and Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3. Movies that develop their characters, that focus on human emotion, and whose direction and special effects make us say, yes, Marvel is back. And this time, I'm convinced of it. This film is the very first of the new era after the writer's strike, and it seems to completely reconnect with what was best during the golden age of Marvel. But should we really get excited about it? What exactly is this film hiding, and where is it really leading us? That's the whole topic of this video. So I suggest we analyze together what you may have missed or misunderstood in detail, but above all, let's go back to that absolutely masterful post-credit scene. Surely the best one in the whole multiverse saga. And yes, it's important. The story is finally moving forward. Anyway, as you've probably guessed, we're going to totally spoil the movie in this video. So we're entering the spoiler zone, the danger zone. You're here with Kevin Buchart, your favorite theorist. Who? What do you mean? But who are you really? Anyway, roll the intro. Thunderbolts is the 13th movie released since Avengers Endgame, and it's the first one since Shang-Chi in 2021 to finally talk to us about, or at least show us, the Avengers. Yes, none of the other movies mentioned it, and yes, you'll mention Captain America. By the end of the movie, I still want more. Sam does mention wanting to form an Avengers team. But the problem is, his character develops so little in the movie that no one can really picture him as a leader, at least not me. On top of that, he doesn't name anyone for his boy band, except for the new Falcon. In short, nobody really got excited at the time, but with the Thunderbolts, my friends, now that's a yes. We've seen them in action, and I don't know about you, but I love them. And not only do we have this team called the New Avengers, but on top of that, we know that another Avengers team is also being created by Sam, and he's not happy about it. Not to mention the concrete connection with the Fantastic Four. But before we talk about all that, let's go back a bit to the context of the movie, a context that's finally clearer. In my previous video, I told you that Bucky and Thaddeus Ross were elected in 2025. Well, it seems like I got a bit mixed up and got the year wrong, because actually, Ross, Bucky, and Fisk all seem to have been elected at the end of 2026. Yes, the invitation card Sam gets in Captain America 4 is dated 2027. I haven't rewatched the footage since the movie is a mess and not available yet. Their situation is complicated, so we need to move everything a year ahead. Sorry guys, and thanks to everyone in the comments for correcting me. But then, what does that mean? First, that the only projects currently dated for 2027 are Captain America, the majority of the plot of Daredevil Born Again Season 1, and the Thunderbolts. So, the post-credits scene that takes place 14 months after the movie actually happens in 2028 or even 2029. Because Captain America clearly takes place in the spring, and Thunderbolts seems to happen more in the fall. Yes, Bucky hasn't finished his first year in office, so it's around October or November. That's an important detail because it means other projects could still be added to the period between 2027 and 2029 series as well as movies. For example, that would leave room for Spider-Man to develop with a movie that would show us a Spidey who has really grown. Because let me remind you that the ending scene of No Way Home takes place at the end of 2024. So Peter will have grown up quite a bit. And yes, just as we were starting to catch up, Marvel keeps expanding its universe into the future, which honestly confuses everyone. Anyway, let's dive into the movie and its hidden meaning. The Depression of the Thunderbolts. The movie starts with Yelena Belova in Kuala Lumpur. Yelena shares her distress, depression, and emptiness. This all occurs during a Tom Cruise-style stunt she performed herself, a leap into the void that nearly feels like suicide, immersing us in the movie's theme. She immediately uses the word void in its original form.
Just a void.
And that's actually the real villain of this movie, because for the first time in a Marvel film, there isn't a tangible villain to fight. Sure, the dark version of Sentry is the main villain, but fighting him has no impact. The void represents the depression and lack of meaning in which all the characters are trapped. Only the courage to face these traumas can fight this evil, a theme that is central throughout the film and is probably the reason why Marvel decided to market the Thunderbolts not as a Disney movie, but as an A24 movie. Which, let me remind you, is another independent studio, sure, but above all, a competitor. It would be like a McDonald's commercial selling a new burger by saying, ours is just as good as Burger King's. But hey, after all, if they're owning it, why not? Yelena herself is the one who defines this idea of the void for Bob. He couldn't put a name to his distress, but now he has that image. A void that consumes him and could consume the world along with him. So yes, maybe it's Yelena who, by mentioning this void, ultimately created this monster because Sentry's powers seem limitless. And all he needs is a little push from his imagination. And that's also why she's ready to do anything and enter this void to bring him out. We see it. He's able to get inside the Thunderbolts' heads, but also to materialize their memories and play with their fears. He's able to absorb an entire world into his own nightmarish psychological world. And if you're following me, it could very well be that Bob will play a crucial role in what's to come. Let me remind you that the reality where Deadpool and Wolverine ended up, and especially Loki in his series, is also called the Void. But how did he come to have such powers? Valentina, the new Nick Fury. A new organization has just entered the MCU. After Damage Control, which we haven't heard about since No Way Home and Ms. Marvel, or even Sword from WandaVision, now it's O.I.X.E, Valentina's organization, that stands out as the entity to watch. She's the one behind Sentry's creation. In the comics, O.I.X.E is the organization that provides Valentina with life model decoys. Never explored until now in the MCU, these are robotic copies used by certain S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, especially Valentina and Nick Fury, to carry out high-risk operations. We saw some of them in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's a little-known organization, but it's connected to the Outer Circle, a secret society made up of powerful men and women who, after World War I, believed that the world wasn't ready to decide its own fate. So, they work in the shadows through assassinations, coups, and wars to shape the world according to their ideals, especially with figures like the Winter Soldier. In the MCU, the Outer Circle hasn't been mentioned yet, but O.I.X.E seems to be an independent organization that also carries out assassinations and attacks with the goal of destabilizing the world. Except it seems to be for commercial purposes, with spies like Taskmaster, US Agent, Yelena, or Ghost working for them. But the disappearance of the Avengers changed everything. Valentina, who is clearly leading this organization, decided to use its resources to illegally create a new superhero. It could even be Valentina that Sharon Carter, also known as the Power Broker, is talking to at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, trying to get her hands on the Super Soldier Serum. Because we learn in the movie that, once again, it's a formula derived from the serum. But she points out at one moment that the serum turns Steve Rogers into Captain America. But for Bob, it could very well turn into a disaster. It's probably with this in mind that Valentina takes over as head of the CIA in 2025 during the events of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, most likely to have more freedom to carry out her project. Valentina clearly sees herself as the new Nick Fury. It's a parallel with the rest of the team, who've all spent years in the shadows doing dirty work, including her, and all now dream of being seen as heroes or of being seen as heroes again. Valentina, who actually mocks Yelena in the penthouse scene. Yelena, you look awful, but deep down, she wants exactly the same thing. With this in mind, she organizes a reception honoring the Avengers. And Bucky isn't fooled, since let me remind you that she's the one who sent Yelena to eliminate Clint in the Hawkeye series, since I imagine her Sentry project can only work if the Avengers don't get back together. However, her experiments in secret labs around the world have been discovered, and the American government isn't okay with that. An investigation is then launched by some members of Congress to remove her from her position as head of the CIA. And Valentina is ready to do anything to save herself, including eliminating anything that could be even remotely connected to the Sentry project. Yelena, star of the Thunderbolts. As I was saying, time has passed in the MCU. We've already seen Yelena in two projects, Black Widow, which takes place in 2017, and Hawkeye at the end of 2024. In the meantime, she was snapped from 2018 to 2023. And we can assume that most of the Thunderbolts were snapped too, except maybe John Walker. In 2024, she's sent after Clint to avenge her sister. Since then, she's been doing missions for Valentina without question, until she ends up at the bedside of her adoptive father, Alexei Shostakov, aka the Red Guardian. We hadn't seen him since Black Widow in 2017, when he was broken out of his Siberian prison by Natasha and Yelena. Since then, he seems to have settled in the United States, where he too has fallen into depression. He dreams of reliving his glory days and pushes Yelena to follow in Natasha's footsteps, which convinces her to ask for more prestigious missions, maybe even thinking about joining the CIA. But it's a trap that awaits her in O.X.E's bunker. There, she discovers all the evidence that a new superhero is being created, but also many coffins containing the victims of these experiments. A document proves O.X.E bought Stark Tower, now the Watchtower, as in the comics. In the post-credits scene, it becomes the new Avengers headquarters again. The bunker scene gives us one of the best fights in the movie, maybe even one of the best in recent years. It's expertly choreographed, with clear influence from the John Wick teams, especially in the flying scenes. Each person had their own target. Taskmaster had to kill John, John had to kill Elena, Elena had to eliminate Ghost, and Ghost had to take down Taskmaster. In the end, Taskmaster got a bullet straight to the head. Ciao, thanks. Personally, I laughed because it was so sudden. Definitely an action straight out of Deadpool. And to further show the lack of respect for this character, their weapons are looted by Ghost and US Agent. Well, I won't go over the scene again. The team realizes they've been betrayed and decides to work together. John surprises us with a huge jump, much higher than anything we saw from Steve. And they end up using their legs to recreate Bob's plan in a human asterisk style, which is clearly a little reference to the movie's logo. Looking closer, you see each suffers from a different aspect of depression, leading them to help one another. Ghost constantly decides to come back instead of running away because she feels terribly lonely. John, however, feels left out and always tries to prove himself, becoming the group's tactical leader. Yelena, meanwhile, is on a quest for meaning and will spend the film wanting to help Bob so she can feel that she too can help others, just like her sister. And it's this need to help and be helped that allows them to form a real team. Together, they manage to escape and find another depressed person, O.X.E. He is the catalyst for all their misfortunes. He feels alone, needs meaning, and wants to regain his self-esteem as well as the esteem of others. He is the heart of this team, the one who will push to bring them together.
We are the Thunderbolts!
Can't call ourselves that.
And it's actually Anna John Kamen, the actress who plays Ghost, who talks about it best during my latest interview with the cast.
On Earth, are they going to work together at all? They're very much centered in their own worlds. And yeah, they're misfits, they're misfitted, they're not a team. But what they do together is they need each other to kind of save their own skin. But what's beautiful is the choice, the journey, and the choice they make to become a team and how well they actually do work together. So, I mean, yeah, they're a group of misfits, but I think they're a great team.
But one is missing. What is Bucky missing on this team? The new Bucky Barnes. We saw it with his cameo in Captain America, Brave New World. Bucky is now an American congressman, the equivalent of a French parliamentarian. He has come a long way since Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Bucky was considered a terrorist by the general public in 2016. As a reminder, he was suspected of setting off a bomb in front of the United Nations and killing the King of Wakanda. Well, even though it was Zemo who was found guilty and was captured by T'Challa and later imprisoned in Germany, Bucky remained a fugitive alongside Captain, hiding in Wakanda. It was only in 2018, or rather in 2023, that he was revealed to the world as a hero of the battle against Thanos. He then tries to redeem himself for the crimes he committed as the Winter Soldier in the series Falcon and the Winter Soldier, only now Steve is gone and so are the Avengers. So, he thinks that to make himself useful, he has to get involved in politics as a representative of Brooklyn. But from his very first scene in front of the journalists, it's clear that he's not comfortable at all. That's why, very quickly, he goes back to his old habits and spies on Valentina and tries to convince Mel to help him. Mel, who is a huge fan of the Avengers. He then realizes this life isn't for him. After his conversation with Congressman Gary, who explains to him that in politics, everything in politics takes paperwork and time, which once again isn't his way of doing things. That's why when Mel tells him that some very important witnesses for the impeachment are currently in the desert, he puts on his superhero suit again, even his Winter Soldier weapons, to get his hands dirty and do the job himself the way he knows how. He will quickly understand that Valentina and Sentry can't be stopped through politics, but the old-fashioned way. That's why he convinces his prisoners to help him. So yes, he could have just called his buddy Sam, but when you think about it, going after the director of the CIA after having the President of the United States arrested might not be the #1 option for a Captain America, who also has to assemble his own Avengers. So he preferred the anti-hero and Black Ops option, but it was already too late. Sentry was already too far gone, too powerful. Who is Sentry in the MCU? So we discover Bob in the bunker while the assassins are killing each other. Just like in the comics, he seems to be just a junkie, a drug addict, and schizophrenic who gains godlike powers. But this time, he gets them by voluntarily participating in an experiment from which he is the only survivor. Throughout the movie, we discover his new powers along with him. First, he develops telepathy by entering the most painful memories of John and Yelena, the memories that define who they are. John, who lost everything by being stuck on his past mistakes. And Yelena, who, as we can see, had the same childhood as her sister, since these memories inevitably remind us of Natasha's visions in Age of Ultron, even down to the color palette. He then discovers invulnerability to bullets and the ability to fly, which by the way, makes him faint. In the Watchtower, he is capable of telekinesis and superhuman strength, and when he shines, his potential has no limits anymore since he simply eliminates everyone he encounters. By the way, the black marks he leaves were inspired by the nuclear bombs dropped by the Americans on Japan, and that's pretty clever, since Sentry's powers in the comics are described as the explosion of a million suns. By the way, let's talk about that scene with the little girl. I think Marvel had never dared to do something like that before, and I think it's a good sign for what's coming next, since it feels like they're less afraid to shock people since Deadpool and Wolverine. We can see that he's also capable of manipulating matter, since he creates several worlds simultaneously that the Thunderbolts dive into. These worlds are representations of their fears, their failures, and their depressions. I actually found that whole sequence really well done, even the form of Sentry under the control of Void. At first glance, the fact that he's all black might seem strange, but the Void represents the great emptiness that Bob feels deep inside. He gradually sucks in the city of New York. He acts like a black hole where all the light is drawn in, which is why he's so dark with no light reflecting off him. And you can see it when Bob tries to fight him. He's contaminated by that darkness. That's something I actually really liked. In short, the Thunderbolts stick together and pull Bob out of that loneliness. By considering him as one of their own, they pull him out of that ambivalence between the manic desire to be accepted and the total rejection of the world. He's now part of this new team, even if he refuses to use his powers. End of the movie and post-credits explained. The movie ends with a new trap from Valentina. And what an excellent sequence. As New York recovers once again from what it just went through. But who lives in New York in the MCU if it's full of crazy people? Valentina puts on a kind of act to get the Thunderbolts' attention. And I have to tell you, I got fooled too. Personally, I wondered why she was acting so badly. While the team is spinning in the intercepted vehicle, a press conference is happening on the other side of the curtain. And then, Valentina officially announces the creation of the new Avengers. In the end, everyone gets what they want. But Elena tells Valentina that from now on, she has leverage over her. Because the team now has leverage against the director of the CIA and O.X.E. But revealing it now would destroy that opportunity for everyone. For Valentina, it's the perfect solution. She takes on a Nick Fury role with a team of Avengers from O.X.E. funded by the government. We can even imagine that this opens the door for O.X.E. to be able to create another superhero without any problem. It could then become the MCU version of the Weapon X project, a genetic manipulation program that, let me remind you, modified Wolverine and created X-23, which is quite promising for the arrival of the X-Men. The Thunderbolts are therefore officially renamed the New Avengers, and well, that's not really a surprise. We all expected it since Kevin Feige's statement about that famous asterisk. The first post-credits scene obviously refers to Red Guardian's speech in the limousine.
Team can be the heroes on the Wheaties. Box with the little kitty Bon.
Nothing crazy, but it's funny. The New Avengers are now on cereal boxes. You can also notice that Johnny Storm appears on Fruity Loops boxes in the Fantastic Four trailer. But it's the second post-credits scene that gets really interesting. We catch up with the New Avengers 14 months later in the Watchtower. They all have new costumes and their HQ looks super cool. Bucky tells us that Sam is going to file a lawsuit against the New Avengers over a copyright issue. We understand that at this point, the relationship between Sam and Bucky is pretty tense. But more importantly, Sam has finally formed his own team, and the new captain is really upset that his friend stole the spotlight from him. Yeah, but at some point, you need to wake up, man. Yelena then mentions a crisis in space, and then an alarm goes off. An interdimensional ship has entered Earth's atmosphere, a ship bearing the logo of the Fantastic Four. And this little sequence says a lot about the future of the MCU, especially about the Fantastic Four and Avengers Doomsday movies. First, the crisis in space. I think Doomsday will show us a rescue mission led by Captain Marvel to go get Monica. Remember, at the end of the Marvels, the villain that nobody remembers uses the quantum bracelets to open some kind of interdimensional rift between the world of 616 and that of the X-Men, which we'll see in Doomsday. We also know that a spaceship is currently being built on set for this movie, that there are sets that look like the outside of the X-Men mansion, that they include spaceship debris, and that the X-Men scenes are currently being filmed. So yes, I think the crisis in space is actually a rift created by a team of Avengers, which includes Carol, to go save Monica at the exact place where Monica disappeared. And since the mere presence of Strange in another universe where dreamwalking can cause an incursion, imagine the consequences if an entire team of Avengers invades another world. For me, this would clearly be the beginning of the multiversal waves in Doomsday, and this post-credit scene could even be an integral part of the final film, just like the post-credit scene from Captain Marvel was in Avengers Endgame. But that's not all. Yes, the multiversal ship of the Fantastic Four, which comes from another universe, finally arrives in the 616. So, does that mean the Fantastic Four lost against Galactus and that their world is destroyed? Well, not necessarily. Personally, I think the Fantastic Four will manage to push back Galactus, maybe in another universe, and I'm actually convinced of that, since the movie seems to take place over several years. At first, Susan fights enemies, then gets pregnant. I think she'll give birth in space, and her child should be 3 or 4 years old in the movie. They're looking for a 10-year-old actor to play Franklin in Doomsday. So, I think the end of the Fantastic Four will see the team triumph, but the post-credits scene will take place years later with Reed discovering the Doom threat. And at the very beginning of Doomsday will show us the fall of their universe. But I suggest we talk about all of this in great detail in next week's video. In short, a post-credit scene that I find absolutely perfect, balanced like the movie, that doesn't make promises it can't keep like has happened too often in recent years. And that leads us directly to the next film, just like the MCU did in its early days. Do you remember the hammer scene? Just thinking about it gives me chills. My opinion on the movie, as you can probably tell, I really like this film. Marvel comes back to its senses and understands that a good movie is above all a deeply human movie, a film that we, as viewers, can relate to and get attached to. Most of the failures in recent years have been bland shows with poorly written characters that always end with a huge CGI fight at the end, which, more often than not, is pretty badly done. Here, it's subtle. The enemy is ourselves. And yet, you can still feel a real Avengers vibe in there. So no, clearly not all Marvel movies should become Thunderbolts, but you can tell the formula works. Well-written characters, direction with personality, and a real attachment to these characters. Even the action scenes, though few, are really impactful, well executed, and well choreographed. In short, Thunderbolts is simply a good movie, and everyone is talking about it positively because, well, it's been a long time since Marvel just released a good movie. My video on Marvel's big reboot is right here if you haven't seen it. See you next Friday at 3 p.m. for a new video. Meanwhile, stay curious. That's the secret to happiness.